It's spinning. Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Tina Fornwald. On March 11th, 2017, life as she knew it was destroyed when her husband, Mark, died unexpectedly from a massive heart attack while on vacation. Mark and Tina were together for 32 years, raised
Mhm.
two wonderful children into adulthood, traveled the world together, and loved each other unconditionally. In 2015, Tina was diagnosed with breast cancer. With the love of Mark, her children, family, friends, and faith, she survived several operations and cancer treatments. Then Mark's death in 2017, and she had no clue how she would survive in his absence. She took the strength she learned from being raised in Chicago and the warrior mentality from serving in the U.S. Army for 21 years to fight the overwhelming devastation of Mark's death. With her faith, countless therapy sessions, and the support of family and friends, she discovered her way and purpose for living. The small daily steps allowed her to keep living and develop her new life. She also began connecting with other widows and widowers to grasp insight and understanding of this challenging journey, which became instrumental to her well being. Those many conversations were the inspiration for Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. She's not a licensed therapist. However, she wants to offer other widows and widowers, along with their community, a way to navigate the heart wrenching sorrow and devastation she experienced. She hopes the candid discussions on the podcast, the resources, and the ability to connect with others on this journey brings hope and encouragement. Tina, thank you so much for being here. Today is May 1st, and I specifically wanted you to be here today as we begin Mental Health Awareness Month because grief and mental health are both shied away from, and you have been through it. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your story, what you are doing. And our stories are very similar. And I'm so grateful that we've connected.
Samantha, thank you for having me here. It is an honor. And you have been educating me just in a little bit amount of time that we've connected with each other. And I appreciate your willingness to be open. I was worried as trying to connect with other people that they would feel like, oh, this is my lane. I don't want anybody else in there. And I am so grateful that that is not the case. As I reach out, we are all trying to use our journey as you're using your own to help other people. And as much as we can use that space to highlight someone else's journey, because people connect with different people. So I appreciate your willingness and just having me here. Thank you.
Thank you. And what you're doing. We connected through Sabrina Victoria, who is
Yeah.
wonderful. She's been on my show. I've been on hers. And all she said was, you two need to meet. And she was so right.
Yeah.
We unfortunately are bonded through this club we didn't ask to join. And
Indeed.
our losses were in the same year. We both went through something traumatic right before our losses. And found ways to connect with others and give back, and you give back through books, which is so beautiful. Talk a little bit about what you do when you meet someone who's also struggling.
Thank you. Widowhood Real Talk with Tina is, and I'm glad you mentioned about the books, it is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. And the three arms of Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, one arm is the opportunity to connect with people over social media. That social media content comes in the way of a weekly podcast that is on our website and 15 other different podcasting applications. The second part of the social media is through TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Indeed, and putting out weekly content. We put out a Wednesday widowhood tip, which is like a short 1 minute reel because when you're dealing with grief, it's too hard to sometimes take in a lot of information and you're looking for one little thing to connect with. So we do that on Wednesdays, and then we're providing reels throughout the week. And then on Saturdays on YouTube and on our Facebook, I do a recap of the podcast that just aired on that Thursday and just give a little bit of highlights because the conversation with the professionals or what it was could last longer than someone can really grasp. So I want an opportunity to sort of unpack that conversation. The resources, we provide books to literally, so right now I'm in California. I just arrived at my daughter's home. And while I was on the plane, there was someone talking about someone that had a death in their family and committed suicide. And we have a little card that gives you a QR code to our website where there are different resources, and your book is listed there and information because everyone resonates with something different and they can select a book that they want. They can purchase it right there. If people let me know directly, I have books that people have donated and volunteered, and I will ship it to them directly. So the books, the resources, second, the social content is third. We're planning in October to have a live virtual conference on how to manage grief during the holidays. And that's underneath the umbrella of social. And the third arm that the board and I are still developing is to create a type of scholarship fund because, you know, like myself, from dealing with people, then when someone has a major tragedy, such as the loss of a loved one, especially if it's a spouse or and the funds were not prepared, there wasn't any life insurance. There was sometimes people die and that last check is all they have. And they are then struggling with how to pay for the electric bill, how to do I need to get another form of education because now I need to re-enter the workforce differently? Do my children no longer have money to pay for college? So as the board and I work on that process of developing a grant and fundraising, the third part would be able to provide some direct monetary support to someone that is struggling because of the impact of grief.
People have no idea the lack of support. It's not only that companies don't give you enough bereavement days. There are limited resources, and there are boxes that ask you on applications, married, single, and it asks if you're a widow. And I have said it's like they take points off it, and there are strikes against you for loans and housing, and it is harder to qualify. And people are shocked when I have that conversation. There's so many people struggling when you experience a loss. And so it's
Yeah.
such wonderful work that you're doing, whether it's helping with planning a funeral or whatever funds they need, an electric bill. People are so grateful at any funds that we can provide assistance with, because really, truly, there's just nothing out. There's very, very few supports out there.
It is. Even when you look at your tax returns, if you are married and it's just you and your spouse and they pass, your tax return that year that they pass, you get to do married filing jointly. The next year, you're single unless you have a child under a particular age where there's a gap for that. But if you're living this lifestyle and you're having a way of living that is based on the two of you, that I remember when you said about the box checking. I remember when Mark passed and having to go to the life insurance company, and they updated my file that day. And they literally, it was this big screen. He had it turned towards me and he flipped it up and he said marital status and he changed it to widow right there. It felt like somebody just sucker punched me. It was just days. I was not ready. I know it seems very small just to see someone click a little icon and say widow, but as you know, it was a part of me feeling like he is really dead. Like this is all really happening. And from talking to, I've spoken to people who have lost their home, they have lost vehicles, on top of that, friends, because we as a society in the Western world, we're barely okay with dealing with death for maybe the giving hanging out with somebody for that first year. But talking about someone that is financially distraught and upset because of their new financial position and still grieving the loss of a loved one, there's not a lot of spaces that people feel comfortable in having that conversation.
And there are limited resources even when you look. And there's a window, right? So you're barely surviving and figuring out how to get through this loss. And you're supposed to know, I have X number of days to think logically and apply for resources. And then when you are struggling and thinking, oh, here, maybe I should look for help, you've passed that window.
Yes. And in that part, you said that limited amount of time. That grief brain fog is going on. You are barely, I mean, you muster the energy to have the service for your loved one because you know you have to do that. And you are also probably leveraging all of the friends and family that are rallying around. And so that momentum, that support, that love gets you through that service. And after the service, rightfully so, people go back to their lives and you are left with what you have left. You don't even feel like it's your life anymore because everything about it is just so catastrophically wrong. And I remember having to pick up the phone and call and say, my husband is dead to a complete stranger because maybe I needed to change a utility or I needed to turn off his cell phone and realizing how many copies of a death certificate do I need and how do I send that? And then someone, oh gosh forbid, if you have to put something in probate, if something was missed, and you have to go to a courthouse, get a lawyer, all those things, and you're doing that in your most minimal capacity mentally to make some of the most important decisions that are impacting your life. And you are struggling trying to do that.
And you think, whew, I got through that one. I survived this task. I somehow mustered up the ability to get in the car, to do this thing. Whew, and then something else comes in the mail and there's another one. Right? You know, like that nobody tells you how many things there are or how many. So that's how and why I've created Grief Hab, because every time I thought, okay, maybe I can catch my breath. Maybe I can come up for air. I don't want it like interferes in your ability to heal because you're just doing these things that have nothing to do with grieving. These are tasks that make grieving harder.
Oh my gosh, yes. It is 6 years. And recently, I still received some mail and some business that was unfinished with Mark. And I was thinking, I thought I covered everything. How in the world did I miss something else? And this came about because I was talking with a friend who recently lost her mother. And she was looking up unclaimed income or unclaimed property. And I was like, I feel like I covered everything. Well, lo and behold, I looked up unclaimed property. And let me say this, there are a lot of people out there that try to get you to pay them to do this. You don't have to do that. You can look unclaimed property and then look at the treasurer of the state in which you resided in. So at one point in time, we resided in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and I looked in those different states. And there were some items, I think it was a cell phone bill or something we closed out. I had to go find the death certificate, make copies, get notarized, and still 6 years into this, sitting down, having that conversation with someone, it still just made me swallow and just a little bit slower. The one thing I can say about like what you're doing working with people, that the death of a loved one is something we don't want to have to experience that pain. It's something we would want to run away from. But from my journey, I've learned when I lean into it instead of trying to avoid it, the energy that I was going to use to try to avoid it was going to eventually bring me right back to it. So I've just learned as it's happening, just lean into it. I cannot run away from it, but I can be there in that moment. And after that, I can give myself grace to maybe clear my schedule. I may not be able to do the things that I thought I was going to do because now my mind is gone back to someplace else. Now I can say 6 years ago, that clearing of the space would have been a whole week. It would have been months. It is amazing to see when you lean into the grief, you talk to people, you share, you open yourself up. It allows the healing to come and to allow other people into your space to know that they're grieving with you and supporting you.
What would you say to the people who resist that? The ones who are suffering alone and afraid to take that step and kind of watching from the outside, but still struggling alone?
That's a really good question, Samantha. Thank you. And especially as the world is re-entering society after dealing with the global pandemic, some people may be dealing with this alone because the idea of dealing with grief is too difficult. Some people may be dealing alone because they've been dealing with COVID and now they're a little bit apprehensive about connecting with people. So there could be a lot of different reasons why they don't want to go out. But what I would say to them is, first of all, I am sorry for your loved one that has passed, that has made you part of this conversation. Or you may be looking at this because a friend or a family member is dealing with grief and you're trying to figure out how to be a good support to them. That the person has died. And in your mind, you may say, oh, I can't wait to go back to my life. It's going to be different. I need to let you know the reality, the life that you had before will not be the same. But you have the potential to make a life that you love, make a life that you thrive at, and make a life that you can be happy with. Now, the road to getting there is going to be on your own course. Some people, it may be 1 month, somebody else, it may be 3 years, it may be 20 years. But the idea that they no longer exist is not going to change. And I'm not asking you, good gosh, you're not wanting you to forget about your loved one because they are a part of who you have become. But whatever those steps are for you to regain yourself and to develop who you need to be in this new journey, I encourage you to take those steps. Maybe it's this first step is watching Samantha's podcast, this conversation to say, those women are not super women. Those women are regular people, and they are able to find step by step on how to survive the greatest loss in my life, and most likely in Samantha's life. Now, but let's be clear, when this happened, we were laid out. We were a hot mess. I mean, there were 3 months I didn't go back to work. To reach out to Samantha and say, can you give me some steps on how to deal with that? Can you maybe a book that you recommend for me to read? Is there a support group, maybe virtually or in person? But I've realized what I'm doing, I don't want to stay where I'm at. I want to be someplace else mentally. And you need somebody to throw you a rope and help pull you along and have the conversation. I remember when Mark passed, I saw a therapist for the first time, was the Friday before we viewed his body. And I came to the conclusion that when we were having children and you're getting a new job, there are all sorts of books about, how to prepare for the first baby, how to prepare for an interview. I didn't see anything out there telling me how to deal with this man being dead that I knew for 32 years and how to live my life. I realized that deficit, that I needed someone to guide me and direct me, and connecting with a therapist, seeing her on a weekly basis. And then until it got to a point that she felt like I was ready for a support group to meet with other widows and have that conversation. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be this miserable in front of other people. This is embarrassing. I don't know what this looks like. And it's like, I got to survive. I have to learn how to live through this. And connecting with the other people in the group really enforced to me that I am not alone. And the one thing I would want you to know, somebody that's dealing with this, you're not alone. You are not alone. And you may say, I don't have any friends because my husband or my wife was everything and I start letting friendships go. Well, you know what? You can make some new friends. You can look up, there's an app called Meetup, where just say you like going to restaurants. There's a lot of people that go to the same restaurant. You can do that. You can join a book club, but you are alive. And I want to say, and if you're feeling guilty because you're alive and your loved one isn't, we have the life that we have, and we get to try to enjoy the moment that we have. And just as Samantha and I are now doing this, we are honoring our late spouses and we're learning to love, as you take those steps in your life, you will learn and find your way to maybe use what you're doing to honor the person that you love.
And I'll say I had to force myself for a long time. I did things and I was dragging myself with that rope and telling other people to drag me. And I had moments I enjoyed myself and I have memories that are nice, but it wasn't until this year that I
Mm,
really started enjoying myself and wanting to do things and really living again. And I'm just now noticing this and recognizing that I've gotten here and I'm not dragging myself everywhere.
nice.
I don't know how long it took you. I'm at the 5 plus, approaching 5.5 year.
I want to say for me, so we lived in Pennsylvania, and a year after Mark passed. So Pennsylvania, where we lived, there was a lot of snow. I went from a four-person household with my husband, our two children, to my husband passing and both of our children going into the military. And now I'm in this house by myself. And I think that unique opportunity gave me a space to grieve openly, where I've talked with some people that because of other people in the household, their only safe place to cry was in a shower or in a vehicle. My emotions were all over that house. So I was all over. So I was just letting it out. And moving out of the house within a year gave me a bit of a refreshing to see life in a different perspective. So then I moved to Virginia, and being in that house, I kind of thought that I had arrived. I thought like, okay, I made the 1 year, check. I relocated, check, check. I got a new job, check, check. And to your point, you don't always see the change in what's going on until something happens. And one of my girlfriends, Allison, came over and she said, "You're not talking a lot and you're very withdrawn." I didn't realize I was calling myself being busy, but I was starting to just turn inward. And when she stood there at the door, I started just the Rolodex of my mind started thinking of everything I was doing. I was like, she's right. I am not as good as I thought I was. And I just started crying and I said, this grief thing is so ugly. I had been putting on a face with my friends, but when I got home, the misery, I had checked the blocks that I did it, but now, like, he's really dead and I have moved. I've got a new job and all the other stuff. So I was dealing with that at home in secret and not really putting it out there. And she told me, I don't care how ugly it is. I don't care how bad it is. I'm not going to let you do this. You're coming out of the house. We're going out to eat. And that let me know I still have work to do. And after that dinner, the next day, I found a therapist. And I realized that when I moved to Virginia, I stopped doing a lot of that self work and dealing with some different things and returning back to therapy. And let me tell you, I plan on having a therapist as long as I'm living, like I have a doctor. Like what's going on in this mind, I constantly need someone helping me to navigate that space. And so going back to a therapist, and for me, where I feel like it really started changing was December of 2020. I had been carrying around a lot of magazines saying, I'm going to do a vision board. I want to, because that was going to be another check that I was going to do. But I realized I didn't believe in that it would make a difference. I felt like I was just living, existing, but I didn't have hope for joy. I didn't have hope to be really happy. In my mind, I was like, well, what if I start doing all this and then I just die? Why am I even going to start doing all this? If I start doing this and this doesn't work out, I mean, Mark died. What am I going to do all this? And that was playing in the back of my mind. And I remember like November, December, just feeling like God was just pressing me, going, if you're going to live, then live. And I'm gonna need you to dream. I'm gonna need you to hope. I'm not just put it on a mat, not make this vision board, but to put it together and believe for the possibility that life can be good. And I sat in that townhouse and I got the magazines out and I had construction paper, and I started dreaming. I started believing if I'm alive and this life that I have is mine, then I'm going to start making plans. I'm going to start making hopes and expectations. What are the things that now it's Tina, not saying Tina and Mark? What does Tina want? Tina has been wanting some square plates. She doesn't even want round plates anymore. I'm going to go get those square plates. I want silverware that all matches instead of that awkward spoon that doesn't go with anything else and you keep using it. I'm going to, on any small level that I could get, to go in a grocery store and go, wow, like there are 17 different jellies. I never knew that. I just got grape because that's what him and the kids like. I can actually try raspberry. I started making, so that vision board started propelling me to live. And I saw the difference in myself. The board is ginormous. It's like one of those 3-4 tri walls sort of kind of open up things. But I would look at that and go, okay, what's one piece right there that we can dream? And it was challenging myself. And those little things, it just helped me. So I want to say December 2020. So when I walked into the new year 2021, it was a difference because I was starting to live and dream again.
Did you think that way before? Did you have vision boards, and did you live your life that way with him?
Oh no, I ain't never had no vision board. No. This was this was me trying to rescue myself with a rope and drag myself off. I
Right.
had lists and things to do
Goals.
or
Right.
itinerary and goals, but a full-on vision board, first time ever in my entire life doing that. But this was a desperate situation
Me
that
too.
needed
Same.
a huge.
Right. It's like we were hurting so much. I had not, meditation didn't work for me. Like this stuff
Okay.
was out there. I laughed at this, Sam. Right? She was one of those people.
Okay.
Right? But now me too. And not only, it's the same timing as well. Grief Hab was born January 18th of 2021. So it's just our
Oh,
stories, and Jim passed December 27th of 2017. So our
okay.
stories, and I had major back surgery. It's just so interesting how Sabrina says you two need to meet, and we do. But it is that you're in so much pain, you're willing to try anything. I'll put
Yes.
this up on a vision board. But when you start believing in it,
Yes.
when you start thinking it can happen, it's real. Now I'm going to put things on here that matter to me. Now I want to make a difference. Now I want to help other widows and widowers so they don't have to go through all the BS that we went through.
Yes. I'm glad you said that because it's like if you could leapfrog off of what Samantha and Tina experienced and say, okay, maybe not spend 3 years there. Maybe you can say, one, I have the permission to live the life that I have. I have permission to be okay with laughing. I have permission to say, let me glean from what those women or maybe some widowers did and maybe pick one piece of that and make that part of my journey and make that part of my healing. And then I think you have the opportunity to reach back and pull someone else. The idea of Widowhood Real Talk with Tina was because as you get further in this journey and other people know people that lose a loved one, people go, okay, I know I don't know what this is about, but I do have this friend who lost a spouse. And here's their phone number. And people would say, well, do you mind if I give them your phone number that they could talk to you? And I was like, sure, that's not a problem because I remember how desperately lonely, agonizing to be able to talk to one person. I didn't have to qualify my words or explain why I felt a certain way, and they would just get it. So my ability to lean into that for someone else was like paying it forward. And those conversations just became more and more. And I realized I could not have a conversation always with every person, but wanting to have a vehicle because I'm a talker, how they could hear my story and realize they were not alone. And my mom, who is 79 years old, has a podcast, and she talks about living well. Timeless Journey is the name of my mom's podcast, and she talks about living and being good to your body. And I was like, if my mom can have a podcast and using what she knows to help somebody, and my mom is a widow, then you know what? Maybe her daughter should learn something from her.
I
And I said,
love that.
and I leaned into what my mom was doing, and I started this podcast. And Samantha, the first podcast was the last week of December 2022. Between all of our socials and the podcast, we have connected with 651,000 people in 19 countries.
It's such amazing work. And I love the 1 minute clips because you're right. People can't focus. They want something short and they want information. And I couldn't read, I couldn't pay attention. So it's short
Yes,
little tidbits, and we'll put it here
absolutely.
in the notes so you can follow. It's colorful, it's grabs your attention.
It is, and that brain, that ability to not focus. I wasn't ready. I didn't know. In my mind, my husband passed. It would be difficult trying to live, but I was not prepared for my reduced functionality, my reduced mental capacity to go from being a high functioning person managing different things out, and to be able to go, I can't figure out what to do today. Like I was stumped. Like I would wake up and go, not the thing when you walk into the room and you forgot what you were going for and come back. The whole day was like that. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And not having enough energy to do the smallest task. And I want to say that I've not talked to anyone that was in that predicament that didn't have that. That is a common way to feel. That I used to just have a memo pad by the front door to write down the things I was supposed to do because I couldn't remember. And then I would go back to that memo pad and go, what was I supposed to do today? And line those out because I didn't have the bandwidth mentally to really be very functional.
And I break it down even simpler for clients because we cannot do complicated, like we need to focus on drink water, simple things to take care of our body in order to do complicated things. And I
Yeah.
told my family and friends, treat me like a child, like a toddler. I
Mhm.
cannot function at life. Tell me when to eat, tell me when to sleep, tell me what to do because I really, really do not know how to do anything and I have to relearn it all.
That is solid information because that's the truth. Because you don't have it. You don't have any means of doing anything. You are struggling. It took me 3 months before I went back to work. And then when I went back to work, it was like half days. I remember people would come up to me at work and go, I'm so sorry about your husband. And I would just, and I left. I was like, we're supposed to talk about work. I remember I was at work and still obviously wearing my wedding bands, and I met someone new that was there at the office. And you try to make small talk is in a safe space that you can. And they go, oh, how long have you been married? Well, that was the first time someone asked me. I gave them the whole Mark Death story. And I was like, when I finished, I was like, that was TMI. They were shook. They felt like they had just lived the whole thing with me. And I realized I need a script when someone asks me, I'm recently a widow. The next time someone asks me, they didn't get that whole story that first person got. But it takes so long. I mean, I remember trying to go into Sam's Club because he loved going into Sam's Club. Mark loved shopping. I liked the Saturdays with the free food part. I was there for that. So he would go in and he's shopping, and I'm just going to each of the little carousels to find out what the free food is to eat. The first time I went into Sam's Club, it was horrible, horrible. Sitting in the car, walking up to the door, and then going back to the car. And like if someone was watching me, they probably should have called like 911 to try to feel like maybe I was up to doing something wrong. And then just finally touching the cart and going inside to get what I needed, and just trying to control myself. It's so many little tasks that you have to do the first time that connects to your loved one that can just really be hard.
That people don't see. how many
Yes.
times you go to any appointment that Jim's still the emergency contact, that they would say, "Is this still your emer," and
Mm.
I changed my dentist because I didn't wanna have to go through that again. I was like, "It's easier to find a new dentist than to have that conversation." There's just
Wow.
little things that other people don't recognize we have to go through
Yes.
back and forth walk 100 times, and they think, "What's that crazy lady doing? She forget her purse," right? And I'm like, that walk," and we 100 times that people think we look fine. We're fine.
Yeah.
They do not know what's going on the inside unless we tell them, and telling them can be a 4-hour conversation that we have before we have it as well. That
It
we
is. Yeah. You talk about telling people as in the podcast and having these conversations with my friends and family. They often, I've heard a trend that because I did tell them, it gave them permission to ask questions. It gave them permission to, I remember it was a 1 year anniversary of Mark's death. And I realized there were a lot of things that I just don't remember happened, that there are a lot of gaps in the process. And I started reaching out to my family and friends going, can you tell me your version of Mark dying? And so many of them said they would have never brought that up to me. They
Mhm.
would have never made their, what they consider small part of grieving Mark, a story worth telling because of my heaviness. But when I did, there were so many stories, so many experiences, and their relationship with Mark started being shared. One girlfriend that helped clean out his apartment where he was living in Virginia told me that she had a couple of his shirts that she kept and she smelled when she was missing him because we had been friends so long, that other people were telling me like how they received the phone call about what was going on and how it impacted them and how it impacts them today. And I want to share that because if you're able to share with your friends and family, I think you'll even more know how much you're not alone, that they are grieving in this process with you, but they don't want to feel like their grief or their scenario has more weight than yours. So they may be holding that back. But when you open up and tell your friends, I want to mention his name and I need you to be prepared. If you're a widower and you're saying, I'm going to mention my wife's name and I want you to be a safe space for me to be able to talk about her because I still love her. This is not Mordolph, the name that should not be mentioned, and I'm walking around like I can't say it. We have to find a way to be honest with the people because we're hurting inside. And if that hurt just keeps stuffing inside, it doesn't serve us well. And we're never able to heal. At least I don't feel like.
There are a lot of people in the grief hab community who say, "My family and friends won't talk about the person I lost. It hurts me." And I've asked them, I've said I want to talk about this person, and it feels like I'm losing them all over again. Um, and I just don't want to keep having that conversation. And I
Mm,
say, I talk about Jim every day. I will continue to talk about Jim every day. I can't force others to bring him up to me, but I certainly will tell my stories and will share my thoughts and feelings. And I encourage others to do the same. What do you say to people who are uncomfortable? There are people who are truly uncomfortable with any type of conversation about loss or people who are no longer with us. It just really does, for whatever reason, it does disturb certain people.
Sue, that's a really good question. A couple of things that come to my mind. I have to say this again. Ask them to watch this podcast. Ask them to watch this conversation because sometimes the people that know us the closest may blow us up or may minimize our thoughts. So let's go, okay, I know you're not hearing me, but would you take a moment to listen to this? And then after they listen to this conversation, maybe it would be warranted to go, One, I know you love me. I know you care about me. You have been in my life, and list the things that this person has done or the experiences you've had. And right now, we're in uncharted territory, and we are all so uncomfortable. But I am hurting inside, and I need you. And I know it's going to be uncomfortable. And sometimes you may just sit there. You don't have to say a word. I just need that it's a safe space to say something. I'm not looking for you to help the conversation. I'm just looking for space that I'm not always in my car, in my house by myself talking about my loved one. And we both knew them. Maybe one time you can share a story about them. They're no longer in this world, but they're still in my heart. I forever carry them. And they still may say no. They still may say no. And you have to say, they were not the person for that. Everybody isn't meant to carry the same space in your life. But if you need that, I am a firm believer that what you need will come to you. So you may make a new friend that could be a widow or widower, and you guys both have a space to talk about your late spouses or your child or your friend or whoever it is that has passed. Maybe join a grief support group. Look up some books. Find people in a community that have a similar path as yours. And it's not that misery loves misery, but if you are any type of trauma and you find other people that you connect with that understand your language, it makes the reality of what you're dealing with a little bit easier because you have common ground. And if your loved one has said, no, I can't talk about it, don't bring it up anymore, then just stop because they probably have fulfilled 70,000 other different things you need. They're just not meant for that. Don't resent them for it. Don't hate them for it. Just accept that probably until this happened to you, you may have just as well been them and not been willing to have that conversation. And accept them for the love that they give you and how supportive they have been. And you'll have to find that what you need someplace else.
Yeah, and I always think it's their pain. It's got something to do with their own pain. And the people who it's not misery loves misery. We are not bringing each other down. We lift each other up. We share stories.
Absolutely.
It's uplifting. So finding that somewhere else, it's not always going to come from the people you want it from the most, but you can find it in other places.
Absolutely. I remember when I was going through the breast cancer and I had, being the logistician's supply person, I was in the military, I had a chart of who was picking me up and who was taking me to treatment because I didn't want it to all be on Mark. And because he was still trying to manage the house and do something. And a friend, we had been friendly, but she called me and she said, I'm so sorry. I haven't been able to help you. But if there's anything you need me to do, let me know. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was getting ready to drive myself to treatment the next day because I didn't have someone on the schedule. And I was like, if it gets so bad, I can just stay overnight there and come back. She said, I will be there. She lived an hour away. She was at my house and we had to be like at the crack of dawn, sort of kind of leaving. And she was there. She brought a journal, a gift. I'm like, how you do all that from the moment I spoke with you? She drove me to treatment and I slept on the way back. There wasn't like I wasn't awake. And I said it to say, the people that help you may not be the people you thought on your list, but when they show up big and they amaze you. And it just warms your heart to know that someone has thought about you and they're there for you and supporting you. So yes, be open to people you didn't expect to help on you to bring that help.
That's a great point. There are the people who show up, uh, you might be disappointed, but that opens the door for others to show up who can be the biggest gifts, and
Yes.
and you might not have expected that. So the people who have shown up in my life that I didn't expect are so near and dear to my heart, and I wouldn't trade them for anyone. So thank you so much. Where can people find you? I will share everything here. Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. They can follow you. That is on all social media platforms, right?
Yep, it's the same name. That's Widowhood widowhoodrealtalkwithtina.org is the website. And if you go there, on the first page is all our social media contacts. The podcasts are listed there. Everyone doesn't have a podcasting application. You can go right there and see them. You can go right there and listen to them. And you may have a journey that you want to share on Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. You may have a topic that you would like for us to discuss. You can submit a questionnaire or submit your journey to be able to be shared with us too.
Thank you so much for your story, for being so real, for everything you do. Any last thoughts you want to share for everyone listening?
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being open to allow me to have this conversation and to share your journey and how you're helping people, your group, and how you're supporting them is so necessary because people feel like they're alone. So thank you for being there with people and supporting them and giving space for people to talk, giving space for people to share and let them know that their life and their journey matters. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you, everyone. If you found value, this was a really important episode. Share it with someone who needs to be a part of this conversation, Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, or in the Grief Hab community. And until next time, always be ruthless.
Bye bye.